Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining. And for folks that will be viewing this later, I'm Leo Kowalski, the Director of Programming at the PA Solar Center. I'm joined by my colleagues, John Bunny-Radapan and Amelia Egan, who work with me on the Get Solar team. We'll talk a little bit more about the PA Solar Center and what we do and how we approach helping folks go through solar. But just at the top, this is a Get Solar Communities Round 3 informational webinar. So if you're listening to this and you're in the center region or in Harrisburg or in Beaver County or in Northern Chester County, a lot of this information will be specifically directed to you, but generally speaking, this will be made available for folks to view in the future for that are participating in other community rounds. And if you are viewing this not in real time, please feel free to reach out to us, same as anybody that would be trying to address our questions as we go through the presentation. Oops. But yeah, so we represent the Pennsylvania Solar Center, which has been around for just about 5.5 years. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of really providing solar access and the benefit of solar to as many as Pennsylvanians as possible, and ideally everybody. While that might be a lofty vision, I do think that's achievable because of the unique characteristics of solar technology. Solar is a really beautiful energy system, energy form, because it can be democratized. You can scale solar panels, like I always say, one solar panel on a shed or a chicken coop up to utility scale solar and everything in between, which is very unique. I mean, there's really no other technology can do that. So there's a real opportunity to create access to solar technology, access to solar energy and the benefits for everybody. And as we know, energy implementation so far historically has not been terribly equitable, neither the benefits nor the externalities. And solar presents an opportunity for us to move away from that history and do something a little bit more positive statewide. As I mentioned, the Solar Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. We receive generous support from folks that are on the slide, but also we do have other business members and we have opportunities for folks to support the Solar Center. So if you're interested in helping us serve our mission, please reach out to us at either info@pasolarcenter.org or one of the email addresses that'll be listed in this presentation. So thank you all for generously sponsoring our programming. Solar Center is trying to accomplish this lofty goal that I mentioned at the top through 3 mechanisms in reverse order: advocacy, policy, education. Advocacy is our outreach to lawmakers, to educators, to folks that are able to help forward the decision making that would be solar positive in the future. Really try to have some robust programming here to help lawmakers understand the benefits of solar technology, that the economic, social, and environmental benefits could be shared by everybody, and it wouldn't really take a lot. Some legislation that could be passed at the state level could really do a lot of work. You see this in other states. We'll talk a lot about how we compare to our neighbors or neighboring states on this call, but things are happening at the federal level, and we really need some support at the state level to get us where we need to be, to get us on par with other states in the United States. Education, that's our webinar series where we're letting folks know about the topics of the day. We're really trying to keep folks up to date on solar end of use recycling, on the different financing opportunities, on the legislation that's being introduced. But we also have a passive resource hub, so you can get on our website and identify solar developers that might be available in your market. And you can also download permitting guides, and we'll have a landowner's guide for folks that are being approached by utility scale solar developers so they understand their rights, understand the best practices in the industry. We're really trying to make that a platform that if you're exploring solar and you don't necessarily need our full guidance and support through the Get Solar program, that there are resources that you can click through passively and learn a little bit more and ideally make the best decision for you and your organization or your family. And then there's the walking the walk, the commercial sector, the work that we do with both nonprofits and businesses, and pretty much every organization that qualifies in those spaces. The only folks that we don't really engage with as actively through our programming right now are residential customers for solar. We will try to get more resources made available, but because our Get Solar support is based in supporting financing and some of the decision making that organizations need to go through. It's just not as relevant for individual residential users. But we keep following our space. We'll definitely be creating some opportunities for residential solar customers. This is just some more slides on our outreach and awareness. We also do a Lodestar Award. Remiss to not mention, and we have a fundraiser / award ceremony coming up in Chester County. We've identified some solar leaders in that region that have really, we like to call them trailblazers, that they're the first folks to solar or have made decisions that can impact the solar adoption in their region, and we want to shout those folks out. Information about that webinar, that fundraiser is available on our website, and if you're interested, reach out to us. We can connect you to the registration if you're in the area and would like to attend. More about the Get Solar program. So our Get Solar program and the communities program specifically are vehicles to get through what we call the Get Solar process. And the Get Solar process really is 4 basic steps. If you're an organization that's never thought about solar or spent any time exploring it, that's totally fine. We can provide comprehensive support for you and other organizations like that. Basic solar feasibility and high-level analysis is us, and I'll have some slides on this, but us looking at how viable is solar based on your physical property. We use a program called Helioscope to examine solar layout for your facilities. And that's an industry standard software that a lot of solar developers use and can give us a really practical look at what solar would look like on your property. We'll compare that to your electricity bills and any information you can provide to give you a reasonable estimation of what the costs and savings, what your different funding opportunities will be. If that is interesting to you, we can then conduct a competitive bid for your organization. So we'll reach out to solar developers in your region, potentially statewide, depending on the size or type of organization you are, to get qualified bids. And we'll package all of that material to you with a comparison analytical tool that allows you to really look at the costs, the savings, the different values side by side in apples to apples fashion. So you can make a really informed decision without having to spend an enormous amount of time unpacking that information yourself. Of course, we'll provide you the full proposals, everything the developers provide to us, and we'll facilitate interviews and opportunities to engage with those solar developers. But we really do try to give you tools to make it a much easier point of analysis to examine. And then if you feel like that makes sense and you have a proposal that you like, we'll help unpack a financing strategy, a capital stack that actually gets you to installing solar. We've worked with organizations, nonprofit organizations in the past on grants. We've worked with for-profit organizations to identify grants that have been available to them, but also identifying lending sources and looking at the different tax benefits. So we really do provide comprehensive support for organizations in the program. If you're listening to this and you're in one of those communities that I've identified at the top, this is entirely free to you to participate in. The program's been generously funded and supported by those organizations I mentioned at the top. So we really do try to make this easy, convenient, free. It's just, I think, a really good opportunity if you're thinking about solar. I mentioned this earlier. Who do we serve? Pretty much everybody's non-residential. We've worked with businesses and nonprofits. We have a large municipal RFP out right now that includes 12 municipalities working together in a water authority and 36 project sites. So we can scale it to that level. We have projects in the queue that are school districts and have successful projects that are school districts. We work with farmers, landowners. There's a growing opportunity for farms and landowners to explore solar as a way to secure some income but maintain their land. A lot of farmland is lost to development and has been lost over the last several years. A significant amount, a shocking amount, really. I think it was close to 7,000 small farms closed in the last 6 years, which is devastating. But if solar can be used to maybe buttress their income and prevent them from having to sell their property to developers, that solar can come back up in 25, 30 years, and that land can be used for agricultural purposes again. And there's a lot of positive benefits to using ground mount solar, by including pollinators, or you can graze sheep on it, so it can still be used agriculturally. The growing opportunity that might be relevant to folks specifically in center region where there's quite a lot of farmland. Faith organizations are another, probably the most common organization that we hear from on a day-to-day basis are faith organizations trying to get solar as a means to reduce their dependency on their congregation for support. It's one utility that they could strike out and not have to worry about, and they can focus their resources elsewhere. Our Solar for Schools program is a partnership with Generation 180. I mentioned we have schools in the pipeline and some success stories here. This has really been through this dynamic work. Generation 180 is a national nonprofit, but they have a state office that works on the outreach and the consensus modeling for school districts. So they're really great at helping schools get to the point where they're interested in solar and develop some interest in their board, or maybe work through the facilities groups, just so that everyone understands the possible benefits and that everyone's excited about doing it, rather than maybe getting like having a solar proposal laid at their feet and they're not really sure what they're dealing with. Once they have that interest built up, they send it to us. We do the technical work that I described earlier. It's been a really great partnership. And if you are representing a school district, or you have an association with a school district, or you're just a citizen that wants to see your school district go solar, please reach out to us through in the communication channels, our info at pasolarcenter.org, or my email address. We'll happily connect you with Generation 180. We're doing a lot of work right now based on this tab. We have a lot of nonprofits between just organizations that are tax exempt, businesses, or sorry, municipalities and faith communities. So all levels of at the municipal level, not your governmental, I mean. But we also have a significant number of small businesses and commercial entities that are interested as well. These are a couple slides just demonstrating some of our success stories that show a range of work that we do. The community College of Allegheny County, north of Pittsburgh, used the power purchase agreement, put about 0.5 megawatt of solar up. This was installed, I believe, I think it was finished in 2022. The school, or the community college, spent no money up front. They're in a 28-year term, and their electricity rates actually pretty significantly discounted. They fell in right before electricity rates went up. So the power purchase agreement that they were quoted at the time was, I believe, 15% discount, and now is probably more like 30, 35. So they're saving a significant amount of money, and they are not responsible for any of the operations and maintenance of this long term. Oh, and I just see a comment, a question in the chat asking if a municipality needs to do a solar RFP on PennBid, are we able to assist? I'm not really, I guess this is a conversation we could have if you reach out to us directly, or let's maybe at the end of the presentation talk a little bit about it. I'm not familiar with using PennBid and whether or not what we do works. We are able to do RFPs for public entities, and we can be like RCAP compliant. So we can definitely be compliant with a public bid that's required for a municipality or a school district. Working with PennBid, I think, would be maybe a conversation we need to unpack a little bit further, perhaps at the end of this presentation.
Hey, Leo, I'm happy to talk about that now or a little bit later.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yep. So somewhat familiar with PennBid. I know they do charge a fee per RFP. So, if you have to use PennBid, we can certainly navigate that. We haven't put our RFP on PennBid before, but I'm sure that we would be able to. But just to note, we wouldn't charge the municipality or organization a fee to run that RFP. So you could save some money not bidding on PennBid unless it's a requirement with your municipality, and then we'd be happy to work with you.
That's great. Thank you, John, for the insight. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about it at the end too, if there's some more questions associated with that. But we're always happy to explore any space as far as supporting organizations if they are required to use a certain kind of application portal. This is a small business that we work with in Wexford. This is, again, north of Pittsburgh. We do a lot of our work in Western PA, and several of our team members are based out of Western PA because, frankly, Western PA is well behind on solar. The Eastern PA, specifically Southeastern in the Philadelphia region, has a lot of solar, I mean, relatively speaking, statewide, and Central, Northeastern, Northwestern, just Western general, not as solar friendly so far. We're really hoping to change it. A lot more solar is happening in these areas, but there's certainly a lot more that needs to be done. And so it tends to be where our projects are, but we are, of course, we're working in Chester County right now. We're working in Dauphin and Center. So we're trying to diversify our geography, as we keep expanding our opportunities. But yeah, so this is a relatively small project. It's just paid with cash reserves. It's a small family-owned property management group. Zabart is automotive center that rents the space. They share the dividend of the solar. That was just something that the folks at the UTS properties thought was a good thing to share that with their tenant as a value add. This was installed by Infinity Solar through our Get Solar program, switched on 2022. Whoops. Burner International, this is actually being installed right now. Pretty significantly sized solar relative to what we normally do, 1.3 megawatts. They actually started with a smaller project, meeting 100% of their current electricity needs, but planning on some expansion and maybe adding another shift to their development. We decided to upsize in anticipation of that future usage. They did receive a USDA REAP grant, which at the time saved them 40%. REAP grants now can do 50% off the top of the system. And I have some slides on that. They receive a First Energy rebate, which is a utility rebate that's available for all the public utility companies or projects within public utility companies. They vary. PICO actually has a really incredible rebate right now. So if you are in Chester County listening to this, you have a 10 cent per kilowatt hour generated in the first year. We can unpack what that means, but it's an extraordinarily good financial incentive being offered, and those things do come and go, or they certainly get larger or shrink depending on the goals of the utility company. But it's through Act 129, which is the energy efficiency savings program that we all actually pay for through our property taxes. So if you're thinking about installing solar, take advantage of that. But yeah, so this was expected to save $2.5 million, and that was before energy costs rose. That was before the REAP grant. This made sense to the folks at Burner without having all those bells and whistles, but getting the grant probably pretty dynamically changed their expected outcome financially. When we say all this, just to say that it is a really wonderful time to go solar. One of my colleagues said on a call recently, this is the best time in history to go solar, certainly in the United States, and that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, utility costs have gone up. That's partially a function of our energy being dependent on natural gas, and increasingly more so. You can see this curve shows that even just over the next 20 years, we're going to be above 70% dependency on natural gas, and that's not a good place to be when one energy form, specifically something that can be bought and sold internationally, is dependent on the international purchasing, like the desire to purchase that and the prices that people are willing to pay. So when you have a war and supply lines are depleted or restricted, you can sell, these companies can sell natural gas overseas for a lot more money than they would be selling it here, which causes our prices to go up. I mean, that would be true of pretty much any fuel source, with solar being a notable exception because you can't really ship it. If it's being installed here, if it's being developed at utility scale, it's going to reduce our dependency and save ratepayers money and prevent some of this price shocking. But in the meantime, we're subject to it. All ratepayers are, and they've saw that over the last 2 years. Solar gives your organization the ability to protect yourself and insulate yourself from that market, even if the larger utility forces don't move in that direction over the next couple of years. Tax benefits are a huge piece of solar. We're going to talk a lot about tax benefits, and if you're representing a nonprofit, you might be like, well, what about us? Good news, the Inflation Reduction Act created a vehicle for nonprofit organizations to collect these tax benefits with a what they call a direct pay option, like a cash rebate equivalency. But the Inflation Reduction Act also shored up the solar investment tax credit, which is the main tax credit that's been around 20 years. We'll talk a little bit about depreciation. This is really only for for-profit entities currently. but solar is an asset that can be depreciated. It can be depreciated on accelerated calendar. This is starting to slow down. So up until last year, you could depreciate the entire asset in the first year, which meant you get about 18 to 20% of the cost back immediately that you spent for the solar. Now it's going to be, I think it's 60% in that first year now, and then over a 5-year calendar, you claim the rest of it. Still a really great deal. It just changes some of the financing dynamics to have some of that money spread out, and it will increasingly become more spread out each year. So for considering solar as a for-profit entity, this is one of the things that maybe will compel you to do that sooner rather than later. But going back to the Inflation Reduction Act and tax credit, tax credit's a dollar for dollar credit. If you're a for-profit entity, your base value is 30% anywhere in the country. This is also true for residential solar customers. But there are a couple bonus credits for commercial entities. The domestic content we won't talk a lot about because there's not a lot of the domestic content available based on the requirements in the legislation. That will change over time, and that's the purpose of this bonus credit. But right now it's really either going to be unavailable or will end up costing you more money. So totally reasonable thing to do if you believe in using domestic content, but it's not a financial saver or driver at this point. Energy community bonus. This is an exciting bonus that's relevant to a lot of Western Pennsylvania, but not exclusively. If you're in an area that has a certain significant amount of unemployment relative to the loss of fossil fuel-based industry, or impacted by the development of those resources, there's some metrics that are outlined that are a little too complicated to get into here, but suffice it to say, there are maps that you can look up, and we can share that with folks that can enter an address, and they'll tell you whether or not you qualify. All of Allegheny County, Westmoreland, and Indiana County qualify, for example, which are 3 Western PA counties that contain the city of Pittsburgh and a lot of municipal or urban or suburban locations that would benefit a great deal from this. But this map is pretty prolific because we've had a lot of energy development in the state. So that for a lot of folks that we're talking to on the call, you're going to start at 40% off on your solar, 40% cost recovered. There's a low-income community bonus. This is a little bit more complicated because there's an application window to apply, and there's a limited amount of funding available annually. But it's using some similar metrics on demographics and median income. If you're an organization that provides low-income housing, so 51% of your funding goes to, or your, for lack of a better term, income comes from providing low-income housing, then you can be eligible for 20% instead of that 10%. So we are actually working with an organization that has a 30% base. They're an energy community and they provide low-income housing. So they have 60% of their solar that's going to be coming back in the form of that direct pay, that elective payment from the federal government. Another tool that's available, this is specifically a good use or a good tool for nonprofit organizations like school districts, like municipalities, larger installations with organizations that have maybe less cash flow, but will have like a reliable energy user over time. Like a municipality doesn't disappear in 30 years typically. So they're a really good investment from the power purchase agreement standpoint. And this is a 3-party arrangement between a solar developer, some kind of tax equity partner. That can sometimes be in-house, like the solar developer can bring their own money. But basically, you would be leasing your property to the solar developer and that tax equity partner who's actually going to own the system instead of you, but they're going to sell you the electricity at a discounted rate. And the advantages here are they're spending all the money up front. They're dealing with the operations maintenance. They're responsible for maintaining that electricity production, and you're not. You're just agreeing to purchase it from them at a discounted rate. And the real value here, specifically to schools and municipalities, is you're locking in a rate over time. A lot of municipalities and school districts and large energy users have supplier agreements. They're used to doing some collective bargaining in that space, but with a solar development through a power purchase agreement, you're locking in for a much longer term than you're typically going to get from a supplier. Maybe you could get 4 or 5 years out of those deals, and they're going to want to adjust on the market rate when those deals expire. So we've dealt with a lot of organizations that had their contracts end as prices were rocketing up, and it presented a really painful decision for them. The solar PPA, it's going to be locked in for 28, 30 years, and you have the option to buy it out and be the full owner after 5 complete tax years. So it gives you some more flexibility. You won't save as much money as you would spending the money up front, but of course you don't have to spend the money up front. And grants and partnership programs are great, and we've, I'm going to show some examples of organizations we've helped leverage these tools, and it's a thing that we would do for any organization that comes through the program. Global Links was our first successful project. Global Links, for folks that aren't in Western PA, they are a nonprofit that repurposes medical supplies so that they keep them out of the waste stream and get them to communities of need globally and locally. They do this operation in a sustainable way as possible. They use recycled waste oil and their equipment on site. They now are a zero energy building. They're generating all their electricity needs through the solar array. And by bundling a roof redevelopment with a reflective roof surface that actually enhances the amount of electricity generated by the solar panels because they collect energy on both sides, they were able to get a solar energy system and a roof replacement for roughly the price that just the solar was going to cost without doing this bundle. And then we found a foundation, Greenmont Energy Sun Club, which is a private foundation through an energy supplier, Greenmont Energy, that was able to provide the upfront capital. So Global Link spent no money. They have 100% of their energy needs covered. The USDA, this will be relevant to some communities on the call. Really great resource if you're in a rural community. So they have 2 programs for nonprofits and community facilities. For for-profits, the Rural Energy for America program, or REAP. REAP is available to any for-profit entity, regardless of what kind of business you provide, as long as you're in a rural area, or agricultural producers anywhere. So if you're a hydroponic facility, for example, in an urban area, you can qualify for REAP as long as 51% of your gross income comes from that agricultural development. The exciting thing about REAP right now is the grants are up to 50% of the total project cost and up to $1 million back. So if it's a $2 million solar array, you can get half of it back if you are accepted. And REAP, or I should say the USDA released a grant application recently for organizations to help more organizations apply. So that's a little complicated sense, but basically they want more applicants desperately because they have a lot of money to spend. So if you are a small business specifically asking for maybe $50,000 or $60,000, it's a brilliant time to reach out to them, because I think they're really hungry to get these projects through and to demonstrate that with all this capital they could spend it out. Last year it was 25% of the project costs, and they had 1 application period, and they could fund $250,000 for a project. This year and ongoing, it's quarterly. This is new rates. So the USDA really wants to help you go solar. They do also provide support for energy efficiency measures as well. The numbers are slightly different on what they offer there, but there's a really good opportunity for rural communities. And I can't stress enough, if you are considering solar and you're in a rural area as defined by the USDA, which we can help you figure out, and we can help you work through the grant, this is a really incredible opportunity. And the USDA is great to work with. In our experience, you can get a lot of information. They'll support your application. They're very good at doing this and helping folks who maybe don't understand, don't typically, farmers aren't necessarily applying for tons of grants like a nonprofit institution would be. They can provide that support. The community facilities, I don't have a slide about this. A little bit more, it has some similar guidance. It's a little bit more nuanced, and their cap is $50,000. But we can help folks work through that grant application as well. Regardless of your ability to find money for a project, like if you do get a grant and your tax direct pay or your tax rebate gets you to 100%, you still need to float some of the cost of the solar for a certain amount of time. If you're waiting for your tax credits, that's a little bit more reliable. Like we know been around for a long time. If you're a for-profit entity, you know how to do your taxes, and then we know how, on what timeline you'll get your returns. For the direct pay, we're just a little bit less certain. It's a new program, and this will be next year, be the first year where people will actually be recovering some of the costs through that program. We're anticipating that it might take a year or up to a year to get your money back. So you're going to likely need a loan or some kind of financing, or you can finance it with reserve funds. But if we're talking about nonprofits, typically that's just not an expenditure that folks really are willing or able to make immediately. So loans are great, and there's a lot of loan opportunities that would actually be a good fit for solar, that understand that timeline of a short-term loan with a quick repayment. And I would like, some organizations are a little averse to take on financing or take on debt, but because of the nature of solar being an asset that generates money, it's a little bit different, and we can help guide through that process. We worked with Heinz Endowment Bridgeway Capital in Western PA to develop a fund, a pilot project that helps nonprofits or municipalities in communities of need finance their solar at like very, very low interest and with very flexible terms to account for that payment, the cost recovery, and to be able to pay off a ton of that loan without incurring any prepayment fees. So if you're in Western PA, this is a good resource. If you're not in Western PA, I wouldn't worry. There's definitely other resources out there like this. We haven't personally been involved with them. The Sustainable Energy Fund is a really good statewide resource that has different kinds of loan programs for specifically energy efficiency and renewable energy. They're really wonderful to work with, and their standard kind of renewable energy loan I'm showing here is a pretty good fit. It's not going to be that same like super low interest rate, but it's going to be probably sub-market. They're used to working in solar, and occasionally they have some other loan programs that they receive some money, and then it's kind of first come first serve. So we can connect you with folks like this that might be a good entity to service the remainder of your payments, or the remainder of your capital stack. Back to the Get Solar process slide. I showed this earlier, but it's kind of recentering on why we're on this call and what we do after talking a little bit about the state of solar. There's a lot to think about financing. There's a lot to think about in terms of the design and what developers you want to work with. The great news is we can do all that for you. Certainly, we need you to participate and engage with us, but we'll do a lot of the heavy lifting so that you can just look at the proposals, you can just look at the financing options, and when we get to the point, then you can be the one that fills out the grant applications or reaches out to these lenders. But we'll facilitate all of that on your behalf, and it doesn't matter how many organizations that come through this program. We'll work really hands-on with everybody. Looking at the feasibility study in a more practical way, this is what it looks like. This is actually North Allegheny School District's Franklin Elementary School. It's a school district that's gone through our program, and in August, their school board voted to move forward with a power purchase agreement, and they're working on the details of that with solar developer BAI Group. But they provided us with some thoughts about what they wanted to do. We looked at 2 different rooftops, one that, as you can see visually, is in much better shape. It was recently replaced, and one that maybe could be replaced as part of the solar development but has some life left, and 2 ground mounts that would be maybe more visible and could demonstrate that they were going solar and making this impact visually to folks that were visiting. We then took that, processed it through helioscope. So we, as I mentioned before, did a practical design that demonstrates actual hardware designed onto the system, to these facilities. So it would then output what is an expected and pretty accurate demonstration of the energy production. And then we compared it with our guidance on sort of industry standards, what the costs and savings are generally for projects of that size and caliber. And we presented them some information. These actually are not from North Allegheny, these 2 pieces. I just wouldn't want to share their information specifically. That's a little too invasive, but just to give you a sense of the kind of information we provide back, we try to make this very linear and very easy to understand. We walked them through this, and they decided to go to RFP. And so we worked with, I believe we received 10 proposals or like 9 proposals from solar developers that included different variations of those 2 rooftops and the ground mounts, and they had different financing options. So it was a lot of information that we crunched, put together, and worked with the school district or representatives there to unpack and then host some site walkthroughs and some developer interviews to hone in on just a couple of those proposals that looked really good. We ended up picking 3 PPAs, narrowed it down to 1, and their board voted on that in August. So this is just another example, as an older model for how we do those apples comparisons. But just to give you more sense, like we would have these different solar developers side by side with their comparables listed. So if you are in one of those counties, and frankly, if you're just listening to this period, and this seems interesting to you, and you want to maybe take some further steps, we have a pre-qualification survey on our website. If you can get that to us by October 13th, that would give us enough time to get the information back to you. But we're really, with this pre-qualification, now I'll show you that in a second. Yeah, this is a form just us getting a little bit more information about your building. Maybe you can send us an electricity bill along with it. That way we can start doing some of this feasibility work, give you a sense of whether or not solar could be a good fit for you. That's, again, this is no cost. We'll turn this out fairly quickly to anybody in these communities that's interested. And it's obviously an opportunity to ask us questions and maybe hone in on what your goals are, or some specifics about your property. But if you can submit that pre-qualification by October 13th, we can get the information back to you in time for you to submit a completed application. A completed application would include, we have an application form, looks like this. It's on our website. And I'll talk about that website address as well. It's just pasolarcenter.org/getsolar. We'll get you these materials, but we also have drop down for each of the communities that you can click through that has those resources. But this application form, accompanied with an electricity bill, is really what we need minimum to get you into the system and get you to be part of this RFP that we'll release on behalf of each of these communities. But blueprints, photographs of your electrical infrastructure, your switchgear, transformers, if you have one on site, any of that stuff be really helpful. We're happy to walk you through those things. Information on the roof warranty or maintenance record. If you're replacing your roof or need to replace your roof, that's okay. Might actually be an advantage to do those things together. So we can work through all of that stuff with you as long as we get these materials by October 20th. Not to say that we wouldn't accept applications or work with organizations after that point. It's just off our timeline to release this and to get the RFP out. And so we can't guarantee that entities that submit later than this will be included. Specifically, if we have a high volume, it might just be quite a while till we can actually get to your project then once we're in it. We have a pretty aggressive timeline after October 20th to get these RFPs out and to get opportunities for organizations to go solar as soon as possible. Because of those tax timelines and because of some of the financing, we want to give people the best opportunity to actually complete their solar array and to get the maximum amount of funding that they can get. Again, all this is available on our website. You just go to Get Solar and poke around. You'll eventually find all these materials, but Get Solar communities, this drop down is a little old, this image, but Harrisburg, it's Northwestern Beaver County, those will appear on that drop down if you go here now. You can also reach out to me, leo@pasolarcenter.org. You can reach out to John at pasolarcenter.org, or Amelia at pasolarcenter.org. Info is another email address that works. Multiple places on our website you can reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. If you're even remotely considering this as a possibility, just spend a little bit of your time, let us do the work. If it doesn't make sense for you at some point downstream, that's okay. But we really want to give you a shot. And that's the point of this program, the point of it being funded and us presenting it at the community level, is to generate opportunities and be, if nothing else, an educational resource. So I will stop talking. I know I've ran through a ton of content, and I'm sure if folks don't have questions now, you'll think of them later. Happy to field those whenever. You can reach out to us via email, and I'm happy to field calls too. So email is usually just a little bit better, so we can actually visualize what you're trying to say and do a little bit of poking around before we get back to you. But yeah, so I'll stop there and take some questions. Feel free to type stuff in the chat if you just want me to read it out loud, or unmute and I can talk to you about it. And I know, John, maybe I think you spent a little bit of time thinking about some questions that we had on the other webinar, or just maybe some general questions that we could field if other folks don't have anything specific.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about, oh, looks like Bill said, is the webinar being repeated tomorrow? Yes, it is same time tomorrow, 12 o'clock.
Yeah, we did 3 installments of the webinars that folks had opportunities to schedule if one of those dates didn't work, and we didn't restrict it based on the community. So we'll be covering more or less the same content. Of course, there'll be other opportunities for questions, and maybe it'll lead in a different direction. But yeah, it'll be the same content more or less. This is recorded. These will be made available on our website, made available to folks that attended, and our community partners will likely be hosting or at least linking back to these presentations. We can also provide the PDF of the presentation if that's a better tool to share with your coworkers or boards or decision makers. Happy to speak with those folks directly too, and we have other presentations and other models.
I have a question. For small businesses who qualify for the REAP grant, do you help with applying for that, or is that something they do?
Yeah, so we've worked with just a couple of REAP grant applications. The one great advantage is if you're applying for a REAP grant and you've selected a developer, which you sort of need to do to hone in on like a very specific price point and provide like meaningful information to the grant. The information the solar developers provide in the proposal covers a lot of the information required, the technical information. The piece that we can't do a lot of support on is the organization has to provide information about their bank accounts and some of their fiscal information. You obviously have to do that internally. We don't have access to that, but that's the bulk of the application, specifically at the like sort of lower level, like the smaller projects, because they have different requirements. The more money you're asking for, it's really just your financial information and the solar information, and you just kind of, the application merges those two things. That's pretty much all you need to provide. But we can provide a lot of support, making sure you have the right information. And the solar developers, a lot of them have worked in the REAP space, so they know what they need to give you. So it's usually pretty straightforward. It's one of the more, I mean, it's a government grant, so it's not no effort, but it's one of the less intensive applications you're going to see if you've been working on grant applications in the past.
Okay. No, it's just because I talked to a lot of small businesses in the area around State College, and I just went onto the USDA and saw that they were eligible. So, a lot of them are having that like, oh, but the money, I don't have it right now. So it looks like at least 50% could get covered with these REAP grants if they get them, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this at the top or when we covered it, but it stacks with the credit. So if you get 60% off or 50% off of your, I should say, from the tax benefits, and you can find a REAP grant that gives you 50%. That's it.
Yeah.
That's your project. So that you wouldn't necessarily think they work that way, but they do, which is really exciting because any of the, like, a lot of communities are at 40% tax eligibility, or the worst case scenario is 30. So 30, it's like 50. You're not spending a lot of money on your solar if you can make a REAP grant. And I do think a lot of these medium to small projects have a very high degree of likelihood to get the grant. They just have to get the application in, and that tends to actually really be the problem, is just getting them to do the application. So we're trying to be present in that space and help them along.
Okay. All right. That's good to know, because I did have a few people who were like, oh, that would be interested. And then but like I said, it's about the funding. And this is why coming to these webinars are important, so that you can hear all the things that are out there.
Yeah. And please send them our way, as many people as possible. And that's
Okay.
actually a really good pivot into Bill provided another question about future dates before the October goal. We didn't have a slide about this because we just have to lock in the dates, but we do want to do a couple of workshops in the next couple of weeks, at least one, probably two, that would cover some specific topics in a little bit greater detail. Like financing is obviously an enormous piece of how to get
Mhm.
solar to work. Our founder director, Sharon Pillar, always solar is technology plus finance. At the end of the day, it's there's a technical piece that we're very good at helping organizations figure out, and there's a financing piece that can be complicated, and we trying to build our ability to provide that support. But we do want to spend a little bit more time digging into finance in a future workshop, but just have another forum for folks that are interested to talk to us. So absolutely, Bill, if there's an opportunity to drive people from your organization or other folks that might be interested, we'll put those dates up as soon as possible, probably by the end of the week. And we'll have some more clarity on when we'll host those. Are there any other questions immediately? And again, you can reach out to us later, but it's a great time to walk through and present that question for other folks that are on the call or could participate later.
Yeah, Leo. One question that we get quite often is, say an organization goes and installs solar on their roof, who would be responsible for the maintenance of the system, and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a couple angles here. If you are self-financing, if you're using grants or purchasing with your reserve funds or whatever, but you're going to own the system, the solar installer developer will gladly provide you an operations and maintenance contract. So there's a manufacturer's warranty on the equipment, and for the solar panels themselves, that extends 25 to 30 years. It's the largest piece of the installation. They're warranted for a pretty long time. If they're going to fail, they're going to fail early, and there's usually a 1 to 5 year workman's guarantee from the solar developer. So and this will be spelled out, and we'll show the comparisons here. This actually was one of the comparison points that led one of our projects previously to choose the developer, or at least narrow down to them, because they had a really great workman's guarantee compared to some of the other developers. But past the point, you want an operations maintenance contract for them to facilitate any of the change, like if they have to switch the hardware out or if there's an issue with the productivity of the system, they will do that work for you. The costs are relatively pretty low to what the savings are, but then they're also monitoring it in real time, and they will provide you access with that software. So you could also watch your solar generate energy in real time. We highly recommend people include that in their calculations. We include that in our assessments, which I should have mentioned earlier. If we do a pre-qualification for you, we will include operations and maintenance estimate, and we also include an inverter replacement. So inverter is a piece of technology on the installation that converts the DC current from the modules into the AC current that you need to actually go into your meter and power your facility. Those will definitely need to be replaced over 30 years or 25 years once. That's what we plan on. So we model that in let's say we model in year 10, because that's kind of the beginning of, depending on the technology, when they're likely to need to be replaced. But they can last 15 years. They're warranted in somewhere in between, but we'll present you with all that information so you make a fully informed decision. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Leo.
Yeah, and I guess the question we get sometimes, we didn't have a slide about SREX or about net metering. We'll get into those, I think, a deeper level, but one thing people ask us sometimes is like whether or not you need batteries to get the most out of your solar. There are situations where batteries make sense, like if you are trying to be a resilient entity or trying to protect against power outages, you would need battery support. If you're not using battery or storage or microgrid, the power goes out, your solar goes out, because it's a huge safety hazard to have a live energy system wired in while people go out to work on what they think is a dead line, from the utility. So unless you have some way of isolating your energy system through a storage system, your power is going to go out. So batteries provide that resiliency. They also provide the ability to shave demand, which is a part of your electricity bill that typically solar can affect, but we don't calculate it. That's really for energy users that use enormous amounts of energy in small intervals because they're getting charged at the highest interval that they use energy. Most folks that would be engaging with us or engaging in solar don't need that because you can use the utility company as a virtual battery. Basically, a net metering means that if you're producing a ton of energy in June when it's super sunny and you have long days, but you're not consuming all of that energy, yeah, you're basically going to get credited for that excess at the end of the year, which would be May for the utility cycle. So when you're, December where your solar's not producing as much, but you're producing a ton of June, don't worry, you're not wasting the energy. You'll get credit for every kilowatt hour you produce up to 100%. And then after 100%, it's a little bit, you lose a little bit of your value. You still get something back from it. But typically when we talk about 100% offset, we're looking at the entire year and factoring in those highs and lows. Great. Well, we have just a couple minutes left. Happy to answer any other questions. But please, again, said a bunch of times, happy to field questions later. Reach out to me directly or reach out to us on our website.
Hi, this is Bill Saby. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill.
Hi, Leo. I was curious if you'd heard of the State College coalition of 15 participating entities that went together to create a 15 to 20 megawatt system, and they're going to find a way to prorate, each share of electricity purchase. I think they probably have to agree to a 15 or more year commitment, but are you very familiar with that or understand how they did that or what the logistics it takes? Down here in Southeast PA, DVRPC had been exploring that option for our counties, but kind of backed off of it after they found how difficult it would be to figure out the intergovernmental agreement. So I didn't know how State College was able to make it successful and whether you have any insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I don't know. I'll obviously give Kelly opportunity to speak on it if Kelly has some involvement. I apologize if I don't fully unpack that piece, but the folks that we're working with in State College, the Center Region COG, Pam Adams, sustainability director there, was instrumental in that. And if you would have been on the call last week, you would have been able to ask Pam directly. But we can connect you if you want to learn a little bit more of that about that piece. It's a parallel thinking, but a very different approach when you get into utility scale development. The timelines, to your point, getting a consensus between a lot of entities is challenging, and there's a lot of agreements that need to be in place, and you need all of those entities to stick in, or at least most of them to stick in over several years, just to get the project off the ground. And they're doing a great job of moving that along, and it's a really impressive achievement. But that's one of the sticking points. Timeline's a little longer. We are working with them on this project as well to kind of capture the opportunities that are maybe underneath that kind of modeling. And the work that we've done with Connect, the Congress of Neighboring Communities, was more about like working with, we still have 12 municipalities and a water authority working together, but they're not necessarily economically linked. Like there's opportunities there for them to work together, and we're going to see how that pencils out. But they're not large enough energy users that they could meet the requirement of a utility scale and go through that process. So we're trying to maybe tackle that at a smaller level. But yeah, there's some interesting opportunities depending on what you're looking to do and at what scale that maybe both could work, or you can start one and do the other. Happy to introduce you to the folks that we know that worked on that project. And there's folks at Penn State University that have been heavily involved that we've worked with and promoted our program that could tell you a lot more about how they're pushing that along. But it is an impressive feat, and it's not you said it's not easy to do. So not that you couldn't do it and couldn't pull it together, but it's a little outside of our wheelhouse to work at the utility scale. It's just the timelines are pretty different than what we typically have to work under with how our programming works. I hope that was a decent answer.
Yep.
I'm happy to provide more information later.
That's helpful. If I can email you all, I'll see if you might put me in touch with some of that group.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're in a community that is not identified as part of our like Get Solar communities currently, there are opportunities. We will pretty much start the conversation with any group that wants to work and do a similar program, a little bit more grassrootsy, like low level solar. I mean, we do municipal, we do schools, but we look at businesses and nonprofits at a smaller level, the way that our programming works. So we're happy to engage with other communities that are not currently on our list, and we can kind of tailor our start and stop with those organizations based on your need and where your programming is at. So I'm gonna make that available too. If maybe you have an idea about something programmatic that doesn't fully conform to what we've talked about today, we're flexible and would love to hear, what other opportunities are out there. We're at 1:02, so I don't want to hold anybody longer if they had other things planned. But again, thank you so much for being on the call. We're really grateful for the opportunity to work in these communities and help each individual project see its way through. So looking forward to hearing from some of you folks, and refer anybody else, even if it's, if you're in center region and maybe somebody's like slightly out of the geography, or you know of an organization that might not fit exactly into what we've identified, send them our way. Happy to talk to anybody.
Okay, Leo, let me really quickly address
Sure.
Bill's thing.
Oh, sorry, Kelly, I didn't give you a chance.
We are having the Sierra Club is actually having a solar success story, and Peter Buck is going to be our main speaker at the end of September, and that's the link for joining that chat. Just because, again, depending on what you want to do as part of your community, and so he's going to be talking about that. So you, Bill, could probably ask some great questions about that. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I actually am in touch with that program where I'm in the Sierra Club Southeast PA group here, and
Yep.
so yeah, we'll be attending that. And I'll in addition reach out to Leo if he can connect me with some of the other.
Yeah. Well,
players,
Peter Buck. Yeah, Peter Buck was
he-
one of the main people on that.
Yeah, I realized that, and he seems to be a little busy, so
yeah.
I had time to respond to my email, so maybe Leo can put me in touch with someone else.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think Leo Pam would be a good person to send him to.
Yeah, Pam's amazing.
After her vacation.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Bill, if you reach out to Pam this week, she's not in the office, so but she will get back to you.
Thank you.
Great. All right, everybody, thank you so much for getting on the call, and look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.